Hi, everyone, and welcome to this month's podcast. I'm so honored to be joined by a panel of guests who are so distinguished. And I'm even honored to be with them today, including my partner, Mashudu, from the CDH South Africa office. So this month, we're talking about the importance of energy regulatory reforms in unlocking energy infrastructure investments on the African continent. And the reason for that is because currently Nairobi is hosting the AES conference, and we thought it would be a very relevant topic to discuss as our distinguished guests are here. Mashudu is also here, and so why not have this conversation? So thank you very much, everyone, for joining this afternoon. So just to get everyone to introduce themselves, we have Ali Mnisi, who is a senior investment advisor at IDC. Could you tell us a bit about yourself?
Okay, so my name is Ali Mnisi. So I'm a senior deal maker at the IDC, and I've been with the IDC for 13 years. Now in development finance.
Amazing. Thank you very much for joining us. We have Mpho Mokwele. I'm sorry if I butchered that name. Who is the head of project finance at the South African Development Bank, right? DBSA.
DBSA.
Okay, tell us a bit about yourself.
Yeah, thank you for having us all the way from South Africa to Nairobi, enjoying the Africa Energy Forum. So I'm Mpho Mokwele, head of project finance at the Development Bank of Southern Africa. Been there for the longest time, executing a number of transactions across infrastructure transactions, for that matter, across the entire African continent, including in Kenya. We've got a number of projects that we are funding here. Since the theme here is about energy, we're looking at a number of transactions in Kenya with your utility here, and we want to do more across the entire continent to develop the continent, of course. So that's what we do. We are development finance institutions.
I mean, brilliant. And that's exactly what we want to hear. And it's positive that you are looking at more investments in Africa. And then we're joined by also Mpho Modise, who is the business development executive at PowerX. So tell us a bit about yourself, Mpho.
Thanks, Njeri. So my name is Mpho Modise. I'm from a company called PowerX. PowerX is an energy trader, currently trading power in SA. It has been operating for over 10 years. It is a first licensed energy trader in South Africa and has been the only one for the longest of time. Basically our business model is to buy and sell electrodes. We are looking forward to growing PowerX into the rest of the continent.
And is this your first time in Kenya?
No, definitely not my first time. I've been in Nairobi. I've done some transaction in Nairobi in my former job at the IDC. Ali was actually my colleague. Okay. I've actually done a power plant in Kenya, in Nairobi. Yeah.
Amazing. So these are the perfect people to speak to on this subject. And then, of course, head of banking and finance for CDH, who is Mashudu. Mashudu, please don't ask me to say your surname.
Okay. Thank you, Njeri, for the platform. Nice to be here in Kenya. My first time. I'm enjoying it. Also enjoying the conference as well. It's Mashudu Mphafudi, head of finance and banking, based in Johannesburg office. And I've been involved in the project, finance project for a number of years, particularly in the energy space, transport space, and the water sector. And it's my pleasure and privilege to be here. Thank you.
Thank you so much. So let's get straight into it. And obviously this is a conversation, so anyone jump in at any time if you feel like you want to. We're talking about energy regulatory reforms. And we're talking about whether or not there is a power to unlock energy infrastructure for this continent. So the first question that we have to talk about is, are energy infrastructure in the continent, are they unbankable, and why do they struggle so much? Mpho.
Quite a loaded question. So, and I'm assuming you're asking about energy utilities?
Correct.
Right? Yes,
correct. The infrastructure itself.
Yeah, so I think part of the problem with lack of energy access is precisely because a lot of the utilities on the African continent are unbankable, right? Which is exactly what we're speaking about today. And what can we do? Just to make sure that they can attract funding.
Correct.
In order to be able to implement transactions, infrastructure projects, and then by so doing, then lead to increased energy access. So the key issues we speak into is a lot of the utilities are debt burdened.
Debt burdened.
Debt burdened, which means they cannot borrow, right? So the minute you cannot borrow, it means you cannot implement some of the plans that you have, power stations that you want to put on the ground to relieve, provide electricity to your citizens. So that's precisely where the issue is. And coupled with not being able to borrow and all those capex capacity constraints from a governance point of view within the utility, where utility is not able to, from an administration point of view, you don't have a solid management team. So you've got some utilities that have not transformed. They have governance issues, for example. So those are some of the aspects that need to be addressed for your utilities on the continent to be able to transform. But coupled with the fact that you need some of the utilities to, harness technology. So we've got issues of energy demand versus supply, where your demand is outstripping supply.
Okay.
And because of that, some of it can be resolved via technology.
Okay.
All right. So, and I'm speaking here about load matching, that type of technology. So if you're able to then harness technology, you'll find that there's a city somewhere in Kenya that does not need as much energy as Nairobi. So what you can then do, you can do what they call load matching and load shifting. You are then able with technology to move some of those electrons, as Mpho was mentioning, to Nairobi, where is a populated city, right? It's most populated. So technology is quite important for our energy utilities to harness that technology, to be able to transform. So business models need to transform just because of, I think we still start in the past where utilities are vertically integrated, where it's transmission, you've got generation, you've got distribution all in one.
Yeah.
So how do we then unbundle that, all those different segments within utilities, just to make sure that the model speaks to what's happening currently elsewhere globally? Because you look at utilities in California, they're geared up for the future, right? So we need to make sure then utilities in Africa are also geared up, harnessing technology, how they are structured, all right, so that the debt burden issues that I spoke about are relieved. So that's quite important.
Yeah.
But we can unpack as we go.
Yeah, but because it seems like a lot to be done, and debt burden, technology, even the structure of how the companies are organized themselves, that seems like unbeatable. How do we overcome that, especially in the face of regulation?
Yeah, look, coming to the regulation part, and my colleagues are going to add around about regulation, right? So there's the energy trading part of it, right, which is quite important. How do you then, in South Africa, for example, from a regulatory point of view, we've allowed the private sector to play quite a prominent role, right? Remember I spoke about being debt burdened, and because you're debt burdened and you cannot borrow money, why don't you allow someone else to borrow money, right? Which is the private sector. So bring in the private sector into the mix. You don't have to do all of this by yourself as a state-owned utility.
Yeah.
So put in place various regulations, and my colleagues are probably much better informed than me to speak to some of the regulatory reforms that are needed, right, as we go along during the conversation. So deregulating some of the energy sector in most of these African countries is quite important to bring in, to catalyze the private sector to come in and also provide some of the capital. So we're talking about independent power producers, right? So your utilities that are state-owned don't have to provide access to electricity by themselves.
Yeah. I mean, who can speak to that then? Can you speak to to privatization of energy utilities? Any of you?
Look, I mean, I think when it comes to privatization, as you said, the key, if we can use an example of SA.
Yeah.
So there's a very well-established, public procurement, program, which we call the Renewable Energy, 4P in SA. So on a regular basis, the government will go and tender and invite independent power producers, to bid, their projects to supply energy, into the grid. It's been a very, successful, program, having gone through 5 iterations. Now we are in iteration number 6. And through that period, the country has managed to add about 14 gigawatts, energy to the grid from independent power producers.
Yes.
Yeah. So it's a very well-established space. Many parties that we see here, at the Energy Forum, as IPPs, predominantly develop those projects.
Yeah.
So you've got the banks who now understand about the risk. Obviously, initially, the government had to provide a lot of support, in order to make it work. So we've got a very well-established ecosystems of buyers, banks are now playing a bigger role. DFIs like the DBSA and the IDC, are in there. So, and we're also seeing benefits to the country in the sense that the cost, of electricity generated by these technologies, predominantly renewable, has been going down, competing, with your base load, coal-based or fossil-based, technologies that has been prevalent for the longest time.
I mean, that's very positive to hear, given that, South Africa, when we go there, we suffer from a lot of load shedding. So it's good to hear that. How can the model that you are talking about be developed within wider Africa? Because I think that's where we need to go, isn't it? So, Ali?
Yeah, look, I mean, I can add my 2 cents worth to it. So, yeah, I mean, what Ali was speaking to is your renewable IPP program, quite a successful program, right, for renewable energy. And when you speak to renewable energy, is the just transition comes into the mix, because let's, we need to decarbonize, move away slowly, but for surely from fossil fuels on the African continent. As much as there is a need to provide energy access, there's also a need to decarbonize globally in terms of the just transition. But coming back to your question around how do we replicate that model, right? So Kenya's done quite a good job, in terms of unbundling.
Yeah.
So you're able to bring, unbundling your generation side. You've got the likes of Kenya overall, that are able to catalyze the private sector. So there's a lot of IPPs in Kenya, right? So there's different models in Morocco as well. So it's not South Africa alone, remember, right? So it's about bringing in CDH is here, of course, right, coming from South
Thank
Africa.
you for the shout out.
And CDH is working on a lot of those programs. So you bring those advisors on board in those African countries in order to share some of the models.
Some of the knowledge as well on how to do it. Yeah.
How to do it, right? So it's quite important. The knowledge sharing aspect of it is quite important. But over and above the renewable IPP program, I think then it's about what we call embedded generation as well. This is where now is private sector to private sector, and it's where the regulations are quite important to deregulate, right? So now you are letting a private sector player, whether it's a mining house or a commercial and industrial company, to buy directly now from a private sector company.
So outside of the government, yes.
Outside of the government. So we've got those types of models. Ghana is doing it quite well. There are projects that we funded where that model is working successfully.
Yeah.
Then what the government is now doing by deregulating, they're letting the private sector just play, right? Play within the market without them interfering. So creating an enabling environment is quite key.
I mean, that's really good. Ali?
No, what I was going to add is that I think also when the SA program, what is very key is the government support. I think the CNI market, the commercial and industrial, where it's private procurement, I don't think that it would have developed to the extent that it has, like in SA, had the government not necessarily led the development of that space, precisely because the state utility would be the buyer, of electricity, and the government would provide guarantees. And given that we've gone through the different rounds or procurement rounds where parties were invited to provide their own generation capacity onto the grid, that allowed the industry to mature so that everyone can understand their risk and opportunity. And I actually believe that risk and opportunity can be attained. You can realize it.
Yeah.
And as a result, that the private sector they started growing from that and many other programs that followed.
I mean, that's excellent. As we are in a very special podcast this month, Mashudu is also my fellow panelist for this. So I'll hand over to you, Mashudu.
Thank you, Njeri. Just to add to what Mpho was speaking about, particularly in relation to deregulation, in the context of the South African market, we have Eskom, the state entity that basically is the main supplier of power. And it's in the process right now of unbundling, such that you have distribution, transmission, and generation. Currently, Eskom does the whole three.
Yeah.
And currently, the way we were working towards, or rather, where the government is going, is to basically establish a separate, independent transmission entity and a generation entity.
Yeah.
That's where we're going in order to make sure that you don't have a utility that's providing all of those, because that model has proven to be not working and problematic in a number of ways. Hence, we find ourselves experiencing load shedding from time to time.
From time to time is a key word there. Okay. So let's talk about energy trading then. What has the ability for energy traders to come into the market done for the potential to unlock energy infrastructure in the continent? I don't know who wants to take.
I'll take it. I think maybe just to give a little bit of background on what energy trading is in the African continent right now, because it's not the same as energy trading in Europe.
Yeah.
So currently in the continent, we've got two types of energy trading. The first one is sort of a sovereign to sovereign energy trading, either through a bilateral agreement between two countries or through a regional contract like the SEP or the WEP, the EAP or the CAP. And then we've got a private sector energy trading where companies like PowerX, where I work, is a private energy trader. We will basically buy electrons from an IPP and also those electrons to a portfolio of customers. So that is
sorry, those customers are private customers, or would it be like a country or a particular region in a country?
So currently the framework is such that it is to private customers. So it's a public-private partnership, because the IPPs that are producing the power still need to connect to a utility infrastructure, and the power will then be wheeled to the different customers within that country.
Okay.
Yeah. So the different models work in that they facilitate the generation and consumption of renewable energy, because all of a sudden we are not looking to just the utility alone to provide power to companies within a country, to companies in a country. We are looking at IPPs also providing that power.
Yeah.
So that provides some form of fast tracking, some form of access to power faster than if we were just looking to a utility to provide that power.
Yeah, and also diversification in the market.
Of course.
I mean, that's excellent. And so is that model being replicated across Africa, and where have you guys seen it being successful?
So currently, I think South Africa is leading in trading. We have had Greenco for a while. which started trading power, but I think they've been focusing on in Zambia, and one of the reasons why they've been focusing there is because trading needs some form of regulatory framework by the utility. The utility need to describe in advance how trading is going to work in its country, what are going to be the wheeling charges of trading in that country, how are you going to connect, and what are the credits and the metering going to be. So because of the lack of that framework in some countries, we have not seen a lot of trading happening. In South Africa, PowerX, as I've said, has been doing it for 10 years now. We've got 4 other traders that have joined, that are starting to trade. We have also been, I think, in consultation with the Namibia regulator and Eswatini regulator, who are now saying this is a new model, it's new. In South Africa, it's operating. What lessons can we learn from this model, and how can we establish our own framework so that we can start having trading in our own country?
I mean, that's amazing. And are there challenges with that kind of model? I mean, aside from perhaps, a price issue, what are the other issues that there could be?
Look, there is a lot of challenges right now because although in South Africa it has been happening for 10 years, there were some regulatory hamstrings that caused the model not to increase capacity. So in South Africa, you were only allowed to build 1 megawatt of renewable energy power unless you were going through the government procurement program. And if you wanted to build anything more than that, you needed to go through some regulatory processes, get approvals, and that was a little bit discouraging to a lot of IPPs. So the focus really had been on building utility scale power generation basically to sell to the utility. But the challenge that has come is that because of the government procurement program, the government procurement program came with a treasury guarantee. Now the lender community like Mpho and Ali are used to building a power plant with some form of 100% backup guarantee, sovereign guarantee, and they are struggling to move from that model when it comes to building a power plant for a trader. So that is one of the biggest challenges. We basically need a mental shift from that community, from looking for 100% 20-year back-to-back guarantee where they were basically taking no risk in project. Another challenge is that we speak of the SAP, we speak of the WAP, we speak of the CAP, but the countries are not sitting down in one table and saying, what is the energy plan of SADC, for example? What is the energy plan? How can we build infrastructure that is going to allow us to export power from one country to the next? So that is a challenge. So if right now as a trader, I have a client, let's say I have a mining client that has mining operations in SA and in Mozambique. In order for me to trade power into that country, I need to get a trading license in SA. I must go get another one in Mozambique. I must go get another one in Zambia or Tanzania. But if we had a coordinated plan, we had a uniform framework, it means I could have one trading license that can allow me to trade in the entire SADC region, for example.
That would be very helpful and coordinate activities, obviously. Has this been kind of the discussion that you've been having at the AEF? Is anyone talking about it in this conference?
Look, I think at the mining in Durban, for example, which was held in South Africa in Cape Town, and the Africa Energy Week, where there was concentration on maybe there were some meetings about SADC or West Africa or East Africa. That's where the discussions have been happening. Even for the African Free Trade
the Continental Agreement.
Yes, the Continental Agreement, those discussions have happened. But you know how Africa is. Talk.
And little action. Well, I hope that has not been your experience in this conference. But anyway, let's talk about energy projects and their bankability. Are they still bankable? Like Mpho said, banks are looking for back-to-back guarantees on, for the length of the project. That might not be the case going forward. Are they still bankable? Are you still interested?
No, look, I mean, this project is still very, bankable. But we're seeing changes, in how maybe on the being structured. I think as Mpho alluded to it. Initially in the initial stages, the government would provide a guarantee, and that made the projects very bankable.
Correct.
But now we're starting to see shorter tenors, whereas it used to be 20 years.
20 years.
Now we're starting to see tenors being reduced about 15 years. We're starting to see the private sector. When you go to the CNI space, the private power purchase agreements, they're actually customized.
Yeah.
So each one is not necessarily the same, but we're finding that even in the renewable space, more and more are being closed. And another indicator of how bankable they become is that you have more and more banks that are going into an area that would have been considered as, higher risk. The government procurement program.
And Mpho?
Yeah. There's just
You
so much to cover.
you smiled when I
There's just so much to cover. I mean, coming back to Mpho, we're saying we need to, as bankers, we need to change our minds.
Sure.
Well, shift our mindset, and that's the word that she used. There's a number of solutions. We need to talk. We need to be creative, innovative, right? So it's all about that. There's always, especially in Africa, there's always challenges. The question is, how do you structure around those challenges? What solutions do you come up with? I've presented a couple of solutions to her. She knows.
No, tell us. You can't give you're not in the yourself.
Proprietary. I'll mention a couple of
Yes,
energy trader. An energy trader is basically, it's a buyer and seller of electricity, right? It's sitting in the middle. Most of them, to the point that she made, is their shells. They don't have balance sheets. That's where the issue is. Now, when a lender comes in, they'll say, who's underwriting, who's underpinning this PPA, this power purchase agreement, right? They're used to power purchase agreements with government guarantees, right? But now you've got this shell that has nothing in it. So how do you get around those issues? So part of how you get around these issues, remember, it's a pass-through. You buy and you sell. So how you get around it is, who are your ultimate customers? So if my customers are bankable, then that's half the problem solved. Right? So that's one solution. The other solution is, can you capitalize the power trader, energy trader, right? But we're not looking for a 20-year guarantee here, to the point you made. So we're looking for a diversified pool of customers. We're looking for a 9 months, 12 months guarantee, just enough for me to be able to replace Power X. They don't meet my obligations under the power purchase agreement, right? Because there's so much demand for energy. I can always be able to sell it to someone else if Power X goes under. So that's how you become creative. That's how we've already changed, shifted our minds. Right? Maybe she's not speaking to that. So we've done all of that. So there are solutions on the table. So we've got to be creative, and we're already creative as development finance institutions.
And is there insurance available? Insurance products for that kind of thing, or not yet?
So we're the ones that provide those insurance. That's what I mean. Products. That's what I was talking about. Guarantees, some form of guarantees that cover.
No, I mean third party insurance. I guess.
I don't know if you.
Can I add to that?
Let's get a little share, and then we on.
Yeah. So in the energy projects, the beauty about it is that, you basically have a developer who's highly experienced in developing projects. And in project finance, you find that the risks are shared and they are allocated upfront. And the allocation is such that it's the parties that can manage that risk that then gets allocated that risk.
Correct.
So in agreements or project agreements such as your, EPC.
Yeah.
So the developer ordinarily is got is the one that is tasked with building the plant, make sure that it works.
Yeah.
But then they would delegate that responsibility often to an EPC contractor, or do the engineering and then basically then provide a guarantee to the buyer that the plant will perform.
Yeah.
Behind the EPC agreements, then you will also then get insurers who will insure the liability that is being carried by the contractors. So behind each and every agreement, the project agreement, you will find that there are insurers that are delegated the responsibility to manage that risk.
Yeah.
And those are the elements that then make these projects bankable.
Yeah.
And that's why you see that how they are funded predominantly with debt. And that is important to appreciate, because banks, ordinarily commercial banks, are risk averse. If you see a project that is funded 70% by debt, already it says to you that the risk mitigation regime in the project, including insurance, is very strong, it's very sound. It gives basically everyone comfort. So yes, there are insurance behind it, and it's precisely so that the parties that can manage the risk best are allocated that risk. And that is the the beauty on the
I mean, thank you for that explanation.
I think the point that I wanted to highlight is that the sovereign guarantees that have been offered by sovereigns have been babysitting the lender community for a long time, and we need to do away with them because they have resulted in high contingent liabilities for the sovereign. I think the risk of funding renewable energy plants in South Africa, in Africa actually, has been magnified. The reason why I'm saying that is because it is estimated that only 28% of Africans have access to power. If you build a renewable energy power plant in South Africa, what are the chances that that power is not going to be taken by someone, especially in a mature market like South Africa? The need for guarantees and insurances are increasing the cost of doing business. Of course, we can't run before we walk. I think we need them, but the mind shift that I was talking about is that we need that to also temper down, because that market is so developed. The PPAs are changing such that they are structured to move from one client to another should one of the clients get liquidated. Yes. So the risk is not as high as we are making it. Yes, it's there. It's not risk-free. But it's like waking up and making shoes without knowing if someone is going to buy them or not. But people need shoes, they are going to buy them. We know people need power. We've got a high power deficiency, someone is going to buy that power.
I mean, you were talking about the fact that the infrastructure is already encumbered largely. Isn't that because when the original agreements were being agreed, there wasn't a consideration for that risk, and also it was being backed by the sovereign, who didn't necessarily take a commercial approach. It was more, let's just guarantee it.
Look, I think it's the rationale for what she was talking about, providing the government guarantees, backstopping, is to open up the market initially. And as the market matures, what you then do is, and we can speak about what happens in America, the developed countries, right? So initially in African countries, those sovereign guarantees are required. But as the market matures and the risk reduces over time, comes down, then it should be, the market needs to regulate itself. We should be able, as private sector parties, private sector to private sector, business to business, we should be able to do transactions on our own in the infrastructure, whether it's energy, transport, whatever it is. You talk about contrast that with developing countries, developed countries.
Like America and
in America, you've got merchant power trading, which is quite developed markets, right?
Can you tell us about that?
So basically, I mean, this is a more sophisticated form of energy trading, where you basically sell your power on the market.
Okay.
On the market without even knowing who your ultimate customer is.
Correct.
No power purchase agreement is even signed.
Correct.
So you put it to the market, you don't even know what tariff you're going to sell your power at. So it's regulated on a daily basis, depending on energy demand vis-a-vis supply, right?
Yeah.
Like what happens on the stock exchange.
Yeah.
So it's that sophisticated. So we need to move over time in that direction. So we are still stuck a bit in the past, where in some African countries we're still demanding guarantees because investors are risk averse, as you're putting it, right? But a market such as Kenya, which is quite developed, right? And I'm saying developed in terms of, the various energy type of structures that have been put up. If you get what I mean, in South Africa similarly. In mature markets. So we need to start over time letting go of those backstops, those guarantees, right? And then next phase, according to me, I'll put it in compartments, is the energy trading part of it, right? Where you still need some PPAs, but not so much backstop or guarantees. And then ultimately we can get to the merchant power trading market, which we need to get to over time because demand is high, as Mpho was putting it.
From a legal perspective, Mashudu, what shifts have you seen to encourage us to think that we are, going in the right direction, either, from a guarantee perspective, from a diversification perspective, from a bankability perspective? What shifts have you seen?
The shifts I've seen over the years, it talks to, for example, the issue of bankability. Some of the considerations that lenders have taken into account when they consider a particular project in the renewable energy market is the technology that is being used. For example, solar, hydrogen, and wind. In the past, historically, particularly in the context of the South African market, we're not really used to those kind of technologies. We would actually rely on European companies to basically assist in terms of providing, services like the O&M, the EPC, because those guys, they've done it for a number of years.
You mean the template documentation?
The template documentation and actually also the technical aspect of it. Because we had never done it before. That was about 15 years ago. So the Germans, the Spaniard would have done it, and then we would contract them to come here and basically cooperate with some of our South African entities in order to deliver on those particular projects. But over the years, we've become comfortable, we have learned the technology, and then we're now doing it. That's an important aspect that has developed over the years from a bankability point of view. From a security point of view, as the colleagues have mentioned, lenders are risk adverse. Because these projects, if you look at them, they are long-term projects, and huge amounts of capital is deployed. And one thing that, particularly when you fund this kind of project, is that, you don't want to lose the money. You want to make sure that, when you put the money, the project works. That is why you see even on the facility agreements, the list of conditions are long, simply because lenders want to make sure that from an environmental point of view, tick a box, from a legal point of view, tick a box, and from a financial point of view, because there are a number of components that are taken into account before lenders release the money.
Correct.
That is why they make sure that before the money moves from the bank, those aspects are taken care of.
If I could just add to that, I think the lenders, although the shift is obviously not as fast as I'm expecting it to be, that we've also seen a shift in that we've seen some very, very robust models where in the previous rounds, the lenders will do a debt equity ratio of maybe 60-40 and 70-30, and now they are getting more and more comfortable. They are even able to do 85-15, which for me speaks to the confidence that they have. We've seen some very stretched tenors. Some are even doing 19 years in a 20-year PPA, whereas before, by year 15, they wanted to be out.
Yeah.
So I think it's positive. It's moving in the right direction, and hopefully we can only see an improvement from here.
Yeah, I was just going to say, the point you made, it's not the lenders that put those conditions precedent. It's the lawyers.
Yeah, we're always arguing over those conditions.
We're actually creatures of instructions.
We are. We're service providers.
Instructions.
It's the elemental kids.
Yeah.
It can be changed.
Yeah.
I thought that we focused a lot on South Africa, and we talked about Kenya. How are we making sure that the rest of the African continent is catching up with more developed countries? For example, South Africa and Kenya.
If I can start on that, from a trader's point of view, that I would really want to see, or what I think will improve the energy market in the African continent, is for countries to stop thinking in silos. We need to generate power for the continent, because we don't have the same level of consumption. I'll give you an example. East Africa, for example, they've got a high resource in geothermal, in hydro, but most of them are not high energy users. For example, like countries that have mining resources that actually need the power, but we all need peak power. So if they can produce hydropower for own use and for export, then we will be able to improve access to power in the continent. And I mean, it's not like they're producing it for free. They'll be selling it to the next country.
It's an extra source of income for any producer.
Yeah.
Okay. Mpho, on your end, are you going out to other countries in Africa and saying the bank is here?
Lots of countries.
Yes.
So, I mean, we've done hydropower projects in the likes of Gabon. I think we are in the process of funding the next one as well. So to Mpho's point, it's all about what resource is abundant in that country.
In that country, where they can leverage on that, yes.
Be it solar irradiation, be it wind, right? So countries such as Gabon. So it's all about hydro. So we've done lots of projects there. And by the way, we'll take those projects from the start, and I'll expand on that. When I say the start, I mean preparing the projects from a project preparation phase where you're developing, you're putting money on the ground, from a concept phase. And
feasibility studies, for example.
How do I ensure that something happens on the ground? Maybe this country is struggling. There's high energy demand in this country, but no one is coming to the party in terms of making sure that projects happen within the country, right? The government is willing, but they just don't know how to do it. So we'll come in wearing our advisory, hats on, with a bit of seed capital, and we'll fund some of those projects. So we've done quite a lot in that regard. And some of those projects, I mean, you speak about, these are projects that have reached financial close. So projects such as Khumbuele have reached financial close in Kabul that we've done as DBSA, right? And they've provided a lot of energy access in those types of countries. And at the same time as you're doing hydro, you're reducing, carbon emissions at the same time. I know there's an argument around a large-scale hydro, whether it's whether it's part of the just transition or reducing.
So carbon offsetting,
carbon offsetting. But yeah, so we are prevalent in a lot of countries. In Senegal, we are there as well. So the rest of the entire continent, we are in all of those countries. So of course, some of the issues is, I spoke about the energy utilities being debt burdened. Some of the sovereigns are debt burdened as well. So they cannot borrow themselves, right? So that's where you need concessional funding to come, blended finance mechanisms to come into the mix, to be able to catalyze those projects to happen. So project preparation is important. concessional funding lines are important, right? In order for that regulatory reforms are quite important as well. In order for the government to create an enabling environment in those countries. Otherwise, investment will not happen, because any investor, once we talk about investors, lenders being risk averse, that who want to put their money in a risky
You can
venture,
get it back.
or you cannot get it back.
Correct. Who would? Ali?
Yeah. No, so we, just like the DBSA, but maybe to a slightly lesser extent, we funded projects also on the continent. What we tend to do is because we're an industrial development corporation, our main mandate is mainly to establish and to retain industrial capacity. So the approach that we followed previously is to fund energy projects, in industrial, rich countries. So we've got power plants in Zambia, in Ghana, and I think there is one in the DRC, to be mistaken. But increasingly, as I said earlier, SA is bedeviled with the load shedding. So the opportunity that we are seeing, and we do export a lot of our energy to the neighboring countries. So the opportunity that we want to explore now, less following the industrial, but is to go and invest in power plants in the neighboring countries. Just like Mpho is saying, you need to look at it as as an aggregated,
As a block.
Exactly, as a block. So we are looking increasingly to the neighboring countries such as Botswana, such as Namibia, more in Mozambique, and then further up into the industrial intensive areas such as the DRC. So that's what we're looking to do going forward. When you do that, we know that the whole area or the whole block, energy security would have been assured. So that's what we're looking to.
Just on that point, specifically on industrial, does industrial and technology mix? Can you say that? Because you're very much focused on, industry, as it were, in the typical sense.
Look, he did mention it earlier. So technology unlocks or enables, industry.
In fact, the question is, how are you harnessing that?
How are we harnessing it? Look, in SA, I can speak about SA in particular, because I think on the continent, I'm not certain that we have funded many technology ventures. But in SA, even though our mandate is mainly industrial, we do fund entities that play in the technology space. I think when you look at telecoms as well, the backbone of telecoms is technology, enabling technology. So we do fund the infrastructure in that space, but then we also we find entities that develop technology, that can give this industry. So so we do unlock, we do look at that, we do consider that as a...
That's the answer I want.
If I can just add to what he's saying, I think energy is obviously an impetus to economic growth. And we have seen the impact of load shedding in the South African manufacturing industry. Energy can help and therefore unlock the manufacturing sector, can help you have a consistent Wi-Fi connection. It can help us reach the dream of Cape to Cairo transport if we knew we have sustainable energy throughout the continent. In the absence of that, we are not going to have infrastructure that is going to move people within the continent, move goods within the continent, because ideally you want someone to wake up in Sudan, make shoes, put them on a train, and those shoes can be sold same day in Mozambique or Kenya or something. Without energy, that dream is going to remain a dream. So that's how, for me, energy is going to unlock the industries that he was talking about.
That is the dream, and also the dream of the Africa Free Trade Agreement, right? And I guess without, real impetus by governments, and as well as working together with, independent producers and energy traders, that really cannot come to life. Yeah. So let's talk about lessons from the AEF then, since we're here. What have you learned from being in Nairobi over the course of the conference?
Yeah. Look, for me, the first thing that I think is worth mentioning is the Africa Energy Forum, I think, is in its 25th year. And for me, it's a milestone that it is now held in Africa for the first time. So, the interactions that we've had, luckily, in SA, the many parties that are in the ecosystem are present in SA. So we, the interactions have been, we basically have just been carrying on from, what, established relationships and, and carry on. But I think it's also important that it remains here so that all these parties understand exactly the challenges that Africa faces. It's not always easy to come up with a solution for Africa, sitting wherever you are. Mashudu mentioned earlier that there is a growing acceptance of parties that are local, no longer international.
Correct.
So this will lead, to the development of that sector and having those parties either as EPC or as IPPs developing solutions for Africa. From Africa's vantage point.
Excellent. Mpho?
I think from my side, I'm very encouraged by the level of skills transfer that is currently happening. In the previous years, in a conference like this, there will just be global IPPs everywhere. Today, we've got a number of African IPPs that are either partnering with international IPPs or that are doing their own small energy projects, which says over the years we've been able to transfer those skills. Africa is able to start coming up with solutions to solve their own problems. For me, that is the biggest milestone I've seen us achieving.
Amazing. Mpho?
Key lessons.
Key lessons, yeah.
It's possible to go a day without load shedding.
I'm really glad that Kenya can represent itself so well.
Within an African continent, so it's all possible. It's all possible. So it's been, and the fact that we can host conferences of this magnitude,
Yes.
right? To Ali's point, I've attended previous AEFs. London is so cold. All over, right? Over the past 10 years, I've attended AEFs, but never in Africa. So this is the first time, and I must say, Kenya has done a good job. Of it.
Excellent.
And our meeting that we do in this podcast, recording this podcast here, right? So it all makes sense.
Yes, in perfect timing, to be honest. Yeah.
It all makes sense. But I mean, AEF is all about networking. It's not so much about the conference going in and listening to the sessions. It's about meeting like-minded people. And whether it's advisors, it's CDH, whether it's technical advisors, whether it's lenders. So you've got access to all of those people, right? Investors. So you've got high-powered delegations, ministers, presidents attending this in order to make something happen. So it's all about that. So, and it's all, I mean, it's been good.
Let's hope it happens, because all of the ideas that you've talked about here are things that can be done, especially in an environment where there isn't a civil war anymore, where countries are looking to develop economically. All of these things can and should be done. Mashudu, your lessons from the conference?
Thank you, Njeri. I think the key takeaway point for me is the fact that, there are projects, having interacted with a number of sponsors at the AEF. And what is clear is that there is a funding gap, and that developed countries must actually, play their roles in terms of assisting those struggling countries to make sure that, there's access to energy. And equally so, the private sector must also play their role in terms of coming to the party to make sure that, the funding gap is actually closed to enable project to move from the ground to basically operation. That's quite an important thing. It's clear to me that, there are a number of projects in a number of sectors and also in particular on the energy side. It's just the ability and the willingness of lenders to fund, and both from a debt perspective and from an equity perspective.
Okay. Well, it's been a wonderful conversation, you guys. Thank you so much for joining me on this podcast. I don't know what to say in conclusion. I think it's where we can go from here, right? And taking the bold steps of making sure that infrastructure projects are bankable and they have the backing of African banks as well as African energy traders. So thank you very much, you guys. It's been a pleasure.
Asante.
And kwaheri. See you guys next month.
Cheers.